I'm Mia Cioffi Henry, and I'm a cinematographer.
Hello, and welcome to Art, the podcast where we get to know women from around the world of visual arts. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 3, Episode 25. My guest this week is the American cinematographer Mia Cioffi Henry, whose most recent narrative feature film, Sorry Baby, won the 2025 Waldo Salt Award for Screenwriting and Documentary Feature Film. And Cover Up, also a documentary feature, which premiered at the 2025 Venice Film Festival. Mia is also known for lensing Endless Sleepover in 2021, Superior 2021, and The Surrogate 2020. Mia was born in Washington, D.C. in 1986. She has an older brother and stepbrother. Her mother, Gay Cioffi, is an early childhood educator and fine artist, and her father, Mel Henry, a documentary cinematographer, and her stepfather, Mark Obenhaus, also a documentary filmmaker. So Mia grew up in an artistic family, following her parents' love of musical theatre while learning dance, a variety of musical instruments, and acting. She attended Pittsburgh College, Claremont, California, where she attained a BA double major in production design and media studies. Mia subsequently graduated with an MFA in cinematography at NYU Tisch as a Dean's Fellow and graduate assistant. In 2025, she was named one of American Cinematographer magazine's Rising Stars of Cinematography, while her work has won jury awards at Sundance, SXSW, and Locarno Film Festivals. Mia is an associate arts professor and head of cinematography at NYU Tisch's graduate film program. She balances her teaching career with filmmaking and being a wife and mother. Mia is a member and mentor of 600 Black Women, a group of Black female identifying members of the local 600 Camera Guild. She divides her time between New York City and Pescara, Italy, with her husband, musician Julian Fernandez, and their 9-year-old daughter and her stepson. Mia, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an exciting time for you. You've already got something screening right now, Sorry Baby.
Yeah, I actually have 2 films out right now. I have a film that opens officially in December, a documentary, but it's going through the festivals at the moment and starting kind of the award season. So yeah, there's a lot going on. It's a lot to juggle. When somebody emails me about, oh, I just saw your movie, I don't really know what they're talking about. I have to clarify things, but it's a good feeling. I think we go through periods of hibernation and creative heads down, and then periods where you feel very out there and also a little frustrated because you're not really working. So it's kind of crazy to be doing all 3 right now.
So everything is where you want it to be then right now, balancing your filmmaking with your teaching. Tell us about your teaching, Mia, and what that involves and how much of a time it takes.
Yeah, I'm a professor of cinematography at NYU Tisch in the grad film program, and also the area head of cinematography. So kind of we all have administrative roles as well as teaching roles here, which I really love. I moved back from Italy where I had been living and started a family to be in New York, basically because teaching offered me a place to live and a roof over my head and a little bit more of a full-time schedule, or at least a more balanced schedule when my daughter was very young. And I always knew I really wanted to teach, and was one of the reasons I went back to school and got my MFA, because I knew that teaching was going to be in my future. My mother is an educator, and I just always loved being in the classroom, and I loved what kind of the container that school can give for kind of one's creative journey. So I knew that I wanted to do that, and I didn't think I would do it so soon, but I was very happy that I did. I teach 9 months out of the year. And the schedule works pretty well where we have the students go into production in the middle of the semester for 6 to 7 weeks. So I have these large swaths of time where I'm not in the classroom and my students are working. And so I tend to shoot films in those chunks of time when I can. So it ends up being a pretty good balance. And then, long winter breaks and summer breaks as well. Um, and I think that teaching uses a different part of my brain. I think that so much of cinematography becomes muscle memory so quickly, and having to stop and explain myself and, oh, why did I do that? Or why do I approach a project in this order or in this fashion, I think is a really great way to remind myself why I do what I do, and both to not get stuck in what I'm doing and also to kind of figure out what's working and what's not working. I think when students question you or look at you for answers, you kind of have to think on your toes and be pretty quick with it. And it makes you solidify the process and kind of the way that I tend to approach projects becomes a little more apparent for myself. And I love that. I love that self-reflection.
And teaching, of course, would keep you very current, wouldn't it?
We would hope so.
Especially, very much in tune with the younger generation.
Yeah. I mean, when I started teaching, I had a lot of students who were my age or older than me. And I've been teaching for about 8 years now. So I do feel it like a generational shift, but I have always looked at my students almost as if my peers that I've just been a few years ahead of them. I have become very good friends with many of my students and get to work with them. I just got to bring one of my students on my most recent feature, and we're like, okay, how do we keep working together? So I love that. I love being able to, kind of provide a bit of a window to students into what their life can look like just a few years out of grad school. But then also that closeness. I was very close with many of my professors and continue to be close with my professors who are now my colleagues, and peers. And so I really love that kind of loose mentorship relationship that I get to build with students.
Sounds like you were meant for academia. Does that mean that you were a good student through your college life?
I would say I was very good at college. I think I struggled a lot growing up. I went to a very academic school where I grew up in DC, and I always felt like I had just missed something. So I think I was always yearning to be good at school when I was in middle school and high school. But I was instilled in me this like very strong curiosity and love of learning. So I think I brought that into college, and I found what I wanted to study. I started out as an actor and then found my way into production design and then ultimately filmmaking and cinematography. And once I kind of found a place where I could thrive on curiosity and being able to follow the things that I was interested in, I think I became a very good student. Yeah, I don't know. Very good student, such a funny word though in film school, because it's just like, what does that mean? I think it just meant that I was curious and active, not necessarily like I got good grades or did exactly the assignment every week, as some of my faculty members will let me know or remind me of.
Well, it worked out for you because, as you say, you got a BA, double majored in production design and media studies film at Pitzer College, that's in Claremont, California.
Yeah.
And then you went to NYU Tisch graduate, where you are now.
Yeah.
And you did your MFA in filmmaking. So you've been very much a career cinematographer, but I'm curious about the acting, though. Where did that come and why did it go?
Yeah, I started out acting when I was younger, just in school plays and then summer productions and high school. And I really wanted to be an actor. I thought I was going to go to school for acting for undergrad at an acting conservatory. And some things happened and that didn't really pan out. And so I ended up in California and wasn't super enamored by my acting program there because I had been through so much intensive training already. And so I came to New York for a summer and got a certificate at Stella Adler and studied Shakespeare and Chekhov and went really deep in the actor's process. And I fell in love with that process. But by the end of the summer, all of my classmates were getting their headshots and going out on auditions. And I just had this very big fear of rejection, just rejection to my face. And this was 20 years ago. The business was not as interested in diversity. It wasn't at the forefront. And I had gotten pretty strong messaging that I was never going to play a lead role, essentially. I was always going to be a side role or a best friend or something, that there just weren't roles for actors that looked like me. And I think I wanted to avoid that type of heartbreak as a career. And I started studying production design because I had always been really interested in construction and built sets all through high school. And I loved thinking about space as an actor and blocking and giving myself something to do on stage as kind of a means of falling into a role by having behavior and having props and having spaces I could really navigate. And so it felt quite natural to start studying production design and thinking about how to create spaces on stage for performers that they could interact with, and that would lead to interesting blocking. So I started studying that and really loved that. But my college boyfriend and our best friend at the time were both film majors, and they were just interested in writing and kind of being in front of the camera. And so they started asking me to hold the camera. And I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And next thing I knew, I was, stealing gels from the lighting department and using people's desk lamps, and started really thinking about lighting and thinking about camera placement, and ended up talking my way into some film classes. And that's when I decided to double major. Growing up, my dad had been a cinematographer in documentaries. And so I knew the equipment because it was always around. I knew the lights and how to set up a C-stand. And, I grew up with stacks of cinematography magazines and books everywhere, but I just didn't really pay very much attention to it until it kind of landed in my lap. And I was like, oh, actually, this is another form of both self-expression and also control, which I felt like I didn't have as an actor. Being able to kind of create a world and photograph a world, all started to really make sense to me. So that's kind of how I fell into it, I guess. And I remember calling my dad and asking him, if you could do it all over again, would you be a cinematographer? And he said, no, which I thought was really funny. Mostly because I think it's a heartbreaking business when it's not going the right way and it's filled with a lot of self-doubt. But he was like, but I would, I wouldn't change anything truly. But you should go and work at a rental house and really find out what it's all about. Because I was interested. This is, still the years before digital. And so that's what I did. I worked at a rental house and I started as a camera assistant in LA. And then when I moved to New York, I took any job I could, starting out in the wardrobe department, then as an on-set dresser in the art department for years, before finally getting some opportunities to work in the camera department, and ultimately deciding that nobody was ever going to just hand me a camera, that if I wanted to learn how to be a cinematographer, I needed a place where I could practice and I could fail, and I could kind of find my own voice and my own process. And that's when I decided to go to film school. And I really only applied to NYU, got in, and that was that. It was the only place I could imagine going.
Well, it's in your blood, isn't it? You come from a very artistic family. As you mentioned, your father, Mel Henry, was a documentary cinematographer. Your mum is a fine artist, as well as being an educator and a photographer. Yeah. So she's looking through the lens. And then your stepfather, Mark Obenhaus, is also a documentary filmmaker. So it was fairly inevitable, wasn't it, that you should take this route? Or were they encouraging you? Were they saying, okay, this is the life?
No, I think it was kind of one of those things. If you see it, you can be it type of a thing. Nobody was ever telling me I needed to get a real job. My mother's constant refrain growing up was, all children are artists and you just need to find your medium. So I think that was, just a natural path and an open discovery that I was able to take. I think my parents were extremely encouraging of me as an actor and a dancer. And it just was, I was able to just find that path on my own. I don't think anybody ever said, "Oh, have you thought about film?" But it just seemed to kind of occur naturally. And I recently, the film that is just making the festival round right now is that I shot was directed by my stepfather, Mark Obenhaus, co-directed by him and Laura Poitras. So I think that was the only time I really got a leg up in the industry from being related to somebody, is when I sort of fell into being the cinematographer on that project. But I did enjoy it.
Tell us about your early childhood, Mia. As you said, you were born in Washington, D.C., 1986.
Yeah.
And you went to Georgetown Day School,
Yeah.
from pre-K through 12 before you went off to college.
Mm-hmm.
What were your early memories of growing up in D.C.?
I grew up in a neighborhood that was, how do I say this? It was Washington, D.C. in the 80s and 90s was a pretty depressing place in a lot of ways, just architecturally. I think to look around, there were a lot of buildings in my neighborhood that were really had been destroyed during the riots after Martin Luther King's assassination in the 60s. And there was just an economic depression in much of the country at the time, but especially in large urban cities, really fueled by drugs and just white flight out of cities. So it was a really colorful place to grow up, I'd say. But I kind of lived a dual life because I grew up in this neighborhood that was a little rough around the edges. And also I went to kind of a well-known private school that was filled with people who didn't come from those neighborhoods. So I kind of had a dual life in a way. But education was really at the center of it. Art and culture was very much at the center of it. My parents were always bringing me to concerts and dance performances and art galleries. And so I think a lot of my early memories are really of taking advantage of the art and culture of Washington, D.C. My father was also a musician and a singer growing up. So there was constantly music in my house. It was just a family life that was filled with lots of socialization and interesting people, lots of artists, lots of just colorful characters, I would say, which was awesome as a kid. And I think it was also, the last generation of kids who got to just kind of be left to their own devices a lot. So I have a brother who's just 15 months older than me, and we were extremely close growing up. So there was tons of imagination and tons of just free time to be and explore the world and have so much curiosity for things around me.
Did he go into the business?
No, he has worked with me on a lot of projects, but he's more interested in law, which is less creative.
Well, that could be useful, having a lawyer in the family.
Yes.
But having that kind of access to culture and the arts, it must have been wonderful for a young person.
Yeah.
I can only imagine, because there is so much in DC.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering who you were noticing in terms of artists, right across the visual arts. Who was catching your eye?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think when I was younger, I was really, I was very interested in sculpture. I remember going to see the Alexander Calder permanent installation at the National Gallery, and just being taken with both the incredible balancing act his mobiles had, but also the shadows that they created. And just thinking of that as, I haven't kind of thought about that as an influence, but I think that the way light plays with space and objects has always been a fascination of mine. And I think I've always had an interest in kind of a geometric sort of graphic style from very early on. When I was in high school, I painted a sunset on my wall in my bedroom, but it was just made with large stripes of paint. So it was like very bold, very graphic, and very geometric. So I've always been kind of interested in sort of the geometry and art and spatial relationships, I guess. Who else? I think there was always my mother, when I was in middle school, started taking photographs. And so she would then have these art exhibits at galleries. And it was always so fun in middle school and high school to kind of get to be in group shows. These in DC, there were these shows called Artomatic, which they would take over an empty space. It used to be abandoned spaces, and then over the years, it became spaces that were never finished, or old offices. But there would be just like multi-floor group shows that just had every kind of art you could imagine. And all you had to do to be in the show was to volunteer. And so my mother would do that every year, and it would be so fun to go with my friends and just kind of explore and have this like cultured art gallery seeming kind of personality with the wine and the cheese. But just seeing that there was art in so many different shapes and sizes. So that was always a really fun thing, and something that I think influenced me, that anybody could be an artist, and that art could be anything as well. But I think I started gravitating towards photographers and black and white photography in particular. I think also Kara Walker, I think, had a big show in New York. I remember going to see, and it's the same thing. Her silhouette images were very impressive to me, and sort of the boldness of just what kind of two colors or two shades could do. I was always very interested in. Carrie Mae Weems, she's another one that I started getting impressed by at the time too.
What do you see first, light or color?
Definitely light. Always looking at the light, always looking at the shadow, really. And I'm always saying that to my students about evaluating light, is to think about light is to think about shadow. Where does the shadow come from? And that tells you what kind of light it is, what direction, what height, what intensity, what quality. And so I think I'm always looking for that. And I think one of the earliest things I could remember as being cinematic in life, and I have no idea when I started noticing this, but is a beautiful sunny day when a gorgeous light is coming in through a window and kind of skip bouncing across the surface, the table, the floor, and then a shadow goes by or a cloud goes by and creates a shadow. And you're suddenly in the dark for a moment, and then it comes back out again and you get relit and the light goes into your eyes. I always have felt like that's such a cinematic moment in everyday life, that I'm always trying to kind of recreate that same feeling of, and that kind of call attention to the light of, because I think it affects us all so much. You know, how do you feel on a sunny day versus a gloomy, rainy day, and what that does to our own emotions, our own nervous system.
You mentioned that you did paint when you were younger. Do you still paint? Is that something that you might have taken up or might in the future?
I'm a horrible painter, but I love paint. And I wish, that's the one thing I really wish that I could do. And I know at a certain point in my life, I will be a painter. And I have so many paintings in my brain that I want to create, and they all have to do with light, and they all have to do with color and contrast, and kind of where two colors meet on the canvas. I know that painting takes so much patience and so much practice, and I don't have the patience or the time to practice at the moment, but that is like the ultimate thing. If I could be a painter, I think I would be happier than if I were a cinematographer.
That's interesting. I wonder what medium you would use then. Do you have anything in mind?
When I was in college, I painted, I did a lot of oil painting and I was just so bad at it. My worst grades in college were in my painting classes, and I think I had a lot of trouble with color next to each other, and being able to kind of differentiate shading, which was really hard. It's easier for me drawing, and I had a great drawing practice when I was in high school and college that I just loved, figure drawing and architectural drawing, especially when I was studying production design. I did so much drafting, but painting, I think yeah, I like texture a lot, and so I would love something that I could really build up with texture and that feels tactile, because I think I'm very infatuated by just how paint as a medium glides across a surface. I think that's so interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe in my 40s I'll be a painter. It's coming up. So
Another career ahead of you. How about sculpting, though, since you love sculpting?
yeah, no, I working with clay, woodworking, all of those things I really love. Anything that feels like textural or it feels like putting two things together, I think is so interesting to me. I think I have a lot of self-doubt as an artist, and one of the things that I like about cinematography is there's like a finite amount of time that you have to, there's a schedule, there's an end point. The schedule has to end, the day has to end, the sun's going to go down or the sun's going to come up. Like it feels like I have to work within a container. I think that a lot of visual arts for me, I doubt myself too much because there's no definitive end point. And cinematography kind of provides this, well, you either got it in the can or you didn't. uh, and I think that's kind of freeing to have to be forced to work within a certain amount of time.
Does this mean you're very disciplined?
In general, no.
But you have to be on set.
Yes, because it's somebody else's time and because I'm getting paid. For my own self, I think I wish I was more disciplined than I am. I think I can go through periods of discipline, but my life is just in so many pieces and parts that one disruption to a schedule and the whole thing gets thrown off. Which is, I feel that way about like eating healthy or exercising or keeping my, bathroom floor swept, that all of those things I think I really struggle with because there's always some other pressing thing that I have to take care of. And when you're making a film, the film is the thing that's the most pressing because it's so delicately balanced. So everything, I just finished this feature a few days ago and I'm like, oh gosh, okay, now I have to deal with the mountain of tasks that I've been putting off for the last 6 weeks, and actually kind of come to terms with the fact that my inbox is a mess, or I need to clean out my refrigerator, or I need to, do my laundry or whatever it is, not just kind of working from survival mode.
Are you good at following your intuition generally? And then when you're on set, is that your guiding light, your intuition?
I think I've always looked for a certain amount of clarity, or I've been most happiest when I have had clarity, when it has come to large choices that I've had to make. But I also think I do well responding to situations, whether that's in my personal life, when it's something doesn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out, or I wished it would work out. We have a saying in my family that my mother always says, it's not what happened, it's what happens next. And so I think I'm very good at responding to things and kind of dealing with, these are the given circumstances. So with that, how do I problem solve my way out of this? And I think that's a good scale, or a good sort of way to approach cinematography, because you're dealing with the weather or the performance or the location or the light or the crew or the director. You're dealing with this certain set of circumstances that you have to respond to, and kind of trying to make something out of that becomes the problem to overcome or to solve. But I don't know if that's intuition so much as like logic, maybe. I don't really have a lot of anything to fall back on other than like my mother's words. Like I wouldn't say I'm religious. I don't know how to pray on something. But I think I know how to look at a situation and kind of be a problem solver creatively and do my best at making logical sense out of what is otherwise kind of a difficult situation.
What else did your parents teach you that you reflect on now as an adult?
I think when I was in college and I first started getting interested in being on set, I worked for my dad a bunch one summer, and he was working a lot with BET because they were based in DC at the time. And it was a lot of just very small stuff like commercial promos or kind of lifestyle, what we call lifestyle now, but was sort of just like follow a celebrity around or that sort of a thing. And there were some really tough situations that I saw him in where things seemed very chaotic or people didn't seem to have their work together, their kind of the preparation wasn't there. And I saw how he worked with producers, how he worked with directors, and was just such a cool cucumber. He just was the most patient, together person on set. And he had a way of having an idea and making it seem like they had this great idea. And I think I really take that as much as I possibly can. I'm not as cool on set as I would like to be in terms of frustration. I think you can really tell when I'm having a tough time on set, and it's a constant thing I have to work on. Is that my face definitely expresses how I feel inside, but I try to have patience. I try to have understanding, and I try to kind of get my ideas out in a way that the director can see that they make sense for the project. And sometimes I feel like that can be a little manipulative, but I do think that is a quality I try to take from my father and from watching him work. But I think a big thing that my mother taught me just in every realm is this sense of optimism and being able to look at a problem and seeing it for the sum of its parts and how to be creative about getting through it. This kind of, it's not what happens, it's what happens next idea is just that life has to move on. So you might as well kind of work it in your favor or make it work for the situation or kind of come to terms with the situation and move forward. So I try not to dwell on things too hard, whether that is an issue with a project not coming together or coming together in a way that's difficult and instead be part of the solution. Or sometimes it's, not getting a film that I really want to shoot or not getting an award or into a festival or whatever it is and feeling like, you know what, something really great is going to come out of this. We're leaving room. There's now a vacuum. We're leaving the door open for something else wonderful to come about. And I think that kind of positivity has led to some great projects, I'll say, and kind of being open to interesting things. That's how I was able to shoot Sorry Baby, is I didn't say no to something else. And then when that didn't happen, kind of leaving the door open for this project to come around in an unconventional way. Meant that I was the right person for that job, which I think is great. I think a lot of people have a lot of expectations about their careers and that it's this linear path. You get this, then you get that, then you get that. And I've taken a lot of side quests, I'll say, in my path as a cinematographer, and they've only made my work more rich and my network more interesting than just kind of movie people.
Do you beat yourself up at the end of the day if you get something wrong?
Oh, absolutely.
What happens when you close the door and at the end of the day and turn in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mistakes or my failures stick out like a sore thumb in my mind over the years. I know exactly what I made mistakes on, and they will still haunt me, even though I try to turn it into something else. And nothing has been so consequential that, it's been destructive to life or limb. But I think those kinds of things are, I try to learn the lessons from them, and I try not to make the same mistake twice. But I, I do, I do try to be a perfectionist, and I have to try not to do that, because I think perfect is the enemy of good. And when you try to be too perfect, you kind of can miss out on some other things. And it's just, there's no such thing as perfect, and it doesn't exist in art. We just are a collection of the things that we've done. And so it's hard to not kind of blame myself for things not being perfect or not going well. Um, and oh, I wish I should have done that better. Or why did I do it like this? But I try to make everything a learning experience, even if I never get that moment to rectify the situation again. I'm still beating myself up right now about the very first scene that I shot on this last feature. I don't like how I lit it, which I never like how I light on the first scene of the first day of a movie, because it's such a, you have to learn what the movie is as you're doing it and who you're working with and faces and spaces. So I always try not to shoot anything important on the first day, the first half of the first day, because I know I'm going to get it wrong, and I'm going to have to live with it.
So, what does that creative process and then or art in general taught you about yourself that are the lessons that you keep repeating themselves to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it teaches you that it's trying not to be looking for this perfect thing or creating this perfect shot or this perfect scene, and instead enjoying the process all the while. I think that helps me be in the moment more than anything else. I think having a kid helps me be in the moment. And so those two things reflect one another and inform one another. Being a parent means that things aren't going to go perfect or the way that you planned. Being a filmmaker means that you're responding to the elements. You are living in the moment. You're trying to be inspired by what's around you in that moment that just before you call cut. And so I think those two things really inform themselves. And it's funny because the career of being a filmmaker, you're always prepping for something or finishing something. And there is this sense of urgency all the time away from your life. But if I can tap into the immediacy and the in the momentness of being a filmmaker, it makes me a better mother, and vice versa. Because you can't control anybody else. So you have to just deal with who you have, whether that's your child or your director, when they're not listening to you.
Do you find that you're very emotional about your work?
Like making it or looking at it?
Both, really. I mean, if you put your heart and soul into something, and I'm wondering, where the satisfaction comes, is it at the end of the day or not, when you get frustrated with the scene?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm very good at what I do. So I try not to take myself too seriously, because I feel like I'm a constant work in progress. I think when I look at my work, I see it for all its flaws as opposed to what's good about it. If I have one image in a film that I think is a lasting image for myself, and that I'm like, oh yeah, I hope other people like that. I think I've done something decent. But for the most part, I don't think I'm very good at what I do. I think that I look at so many of my peers, and I think they're already such masters. And so I think in that sense, I'm hard on myself, and I'm constantly trying for something better, but I really love what I do. And so I think I get emotional in that way because I get very attached to the people that I work with and the excitement I feel when I'm making something, even if I don't think it's very good. So I work really hard for that, for getting to do the thing that I like to do.
What have been the most pivotal phases of your life and the milestones along the way so far that have guided you to where you are today?
I took a class in college called Media Sketchbook, my professor, Jesse Lerner, and he had us making films every week. They could be any length, but I think they had to be under 2 minutes, at least at the beginning, because they were sketches. So it was every single week you had to put something up, but it could be 30 seconds. Maybe I just didn't make anything over 2 minutes at all on my own. But one of my very first, it might have been my very first project in that class. I made a film where I went to my college boyfriend's house and he had a bunch of dishes in the sink. And I put the camera in the sink with the dishes. And then I just said to him, hey, I'm going to press record and just go with it. And I put the focus, I set the focus. This was one of my first, very, very, very first films. I did not know what I was doing technically at all, but I set the focus on the dishes in the sink and there was a little drop coming down from the faucet. And then I picked a fight with him about doing the dishes in the background. And we're just blurry walking in and out of the background. And you can hear us arguing about the dishes. And I remember showing that in the class and the lights coming on and all of my classmates just saying how bad they felt for the dishes, that I was able to create an emotional response about an inanimate object because of how and where I placed the camera. And I think that has been the thing I've then been chasing ever since, that ability to tell a story just by where the camera was placed. And I think that lesson that I learned, that instinct that I had, has been kind of my guiding principle. So anytime in my career where I've been able to affect that kind of emotion through my work, I feel like is a little pin in kind of the roadmap of my life. And it doesn't happen all that often. I think that there's a lot of projects that are very forgettable that we all shoot in our careers. But when it does happen, I feel like, and somebody notices and I affect one person, then I feel like, okay, I'm getting better. I'm making progress. I'm continuing to do the thing that I set out to do, and I'm refining that. So I think my first feature is this film called The Surrogate, and it was set to premiere at South by Southwest in 2020. Of course, that all fell apart. But it was when that film then did kind of start to reach audiences, I felt like it had a similar feeling. The whole thing was handheld, and I just had my daughter not that long before that. So it felt like this big milestone to be making my first feature, to be physically able to hold the camera and shoot the film entirely on my shoulder, and to kind of create a story that to me felt very important, and then also have this connection with audiences. I think Sorry Baby has certainly been one of those, but on this much larger scale now, still that same thing where you can connect with an audience member, you can connect with somebody who's seen the film, what I do with the camera being impactful on a character, and then ultimately on an emotion that we're trying to evoke. But now it has this really big audience and this much larger platform. So I feel like those are kind of turning points. And there have been a bunch of minor ones along the way, but those have been moments that I think I can look at. I think I'm in the middle of one right now that feels like, oh, okay, my career is going to be very different moving forward. I'm not sure what that means or what I want it to mean, but my time as kind of a low key New York indie DP is changing for better or worse. We'll see.
Is directing in your future?
I think I'd like to direct someday. I think I think I have the facility, certainly the training, because I when you get an MFA at NYU, everybody directs, everybody writes, shoots, edits, produces, acts. Like you have to do everything. We all had to do sound. And so I have a very well rounded background in that. I think what I don't have is this desperate need for my voice in script form to be heard. I think as a director, you have to be so singular with what you're trying to say. And because it's so hard to make a movie and you get to do such little directing in your career, the actual act of speaking to actors and being on set in the moment directing, everything else is kind of like very administrative, very self productive, kind of selling yourself, selling your voice, selling your ideas. And I don't think I'm very good at that part. And I haven't had anything yet that I really want to be doing and want to be pushing. I think I'm still very much loving being a DP. I think that there's also this idea that being a director is like the ultimate goal for everybody, where I think my personality is very well suited for being a cinematographer, and there's a lot more mastery. There's a lot more I have yet to learn in that world, that not everything has to lead to directing as this ultimate sort of goal. But maybe as a side quest, as a side project, I would like to direct something at some point. If I have something to say, then yeah.
Where do you seek your validation for your work?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think that's the first question that's really stumped me. I'd say my mother, but my mother likes everything that I do. But I do like to make movies that I know she's going to like, because we're so close, and I like to make her happy in that way. Where do I seek my validation? I guess I don't know that I do. It's not that's not the grandest motivating factor, but I do feel like films are not made in a vacuum. So you need an audience. I think that painting can be this solitary thing. Taking photographs stills can be this very solitary thing, because you're creating an image for yourself to enjoy. And then maybe you're sharing that with somebody else, or it's like that process of developing a photograph that's very satisfying, that process of dragging a brush across a canvas that feels productive. I think films are a conversation between the filmmakers and the audience by nature. And so being able to share something and get a response is very exciting. But at the same time, you can't make things just for the audience, because you have to be secure in what you want to say as a filmmaker and kind of how you put something up. So I don't find, reading reviews on Letterboxd to be very validating. In fact, I find that to be quite the opposite. But there's a certain amount of kind of letting go of a project and letting it belong to somebody else. I saw the other day somebody had an image from Sorry Baby as their avatar, their icon on Instagram, and I was just like, wait, what? A photograph that I took, has made the film has made such an impression on you that you want to identify as this character, as this moment in the film. This now has nothing to do with me. This is now beyond my original intention. And therefore it's, it's kind of, it's gone, from my connection anyway, but I appreciate it. Does it validate me? I'm not sure. I don't know. I guess the validation comes from the people that I care about the most being entertained or moved, or having just witnessed something that I've gotten to create.
How much does your father and your stepfather, how much do they critique your work, or help you, maybe consult for you and help you along the way?
Yeah. They're such cheerleaders, and my mother too. Everybody as image makers, they're such cheerleaders. Sometimes my dad is really funny though, because I remember once he called me on set and I couldn't pick up the phone because I was setting up a shot, but I sent him a text, "Hey, I'm on set," and then a picture of the monitor, and he just texts me back, "Honey, that's a lot of backlight." And it's like, I'm not done. I'm not done lighting yet. I'm in the middle of this. But then I'm like, oh, is it too much backlight? Was I done lighting that? So I think they're constructively critical in my life. My husband as well, as he's a musician and an artist, and everybody can be they can be constructively critical, which I appreciate because I'm that way with all of them. I think working with my stepfather recently was so interesting because, if he's directing, then that means he's my boss, and I'm kind of running ideas past him and sort of saying, oh, do you like this? Do you not? What are the preferences here? What's the intention? And also kind of me pushing back and questioning in the way that I have to do with directors about why we're doing something or where we're doing something, whether or not something's a good idea, if it's, either artistically or logistically. So I really like that, but I like working with people that I'm close with. So I think that makes sense to me. I think I also recently have been having this conversation about nepotism and being a nepo baby and whether or not I am. And I think that all families should make films together, whether or not they're filmmakers. I think there's something about like sharing the creative process as part of kind of a family coat of arms, things that you care about. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I'm really glad that I have inherited the creative curiosity that I have from my parents. And I like when they have things to say that aren't just, oh, that was nice or that was pretty, but are really engaging with the work and questioning the work or questioning why I did or didn't do something. I do appreciate that, but I do always find it funny when my father critiques my lighting or my framing.
Taking home movies to the next level, though, aren't you? Really?
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean the home movies, they're films from my childhood, but oftentimes it was my father doing a beautiful VHS or Betamax recording of a fruit bowl in the light or a sculpture, with in front of a beautiful sunset, and just my brother and I screaming and crying in the background. Not actually making it into the shot, but you can hear us calling for our dad.
Your mum, Gay Cioffi, she's Italian. So how did your parents meet then?
Her family's Italian. She grew up in Pittsburgh. So her father and her grandparents moved from Italy to New York and then to Pennsylvania. She grew up in Pittsburgh, very much working class Italian American family. My father grew up in Baltimore, but they met in Washington, D.C. I think at a house party. Or a picnic. They used to go to these picnics together in Washington with this group, like this big kind of rambling friend group. I think that's how they met.
Because interesting, hey, how that's come around, because you're now spending half your time in Italy with your husband,
Yeah.
as you said, and your stepson is there, but your daughter is here. So you're back and forth. No wonder you have a hectic life, Mia.
Yeah, we do the back and forth.
I'm wondering who you most take after with so much artistry in the family. There's so many traits you could have inherited, but who do you think you most take after?
I really think I'm this great mix of both of my parents. I'm very close with both of my parents, but I talk to my mother near constantly. She's in London at the moment, and I keep trying to figure out when is the right time to call her, because I haven't spoken to her yet today. But it's, I think they both have these very admirable artistic, creative, expressive traits to them. I think my mother does everything. She ran a nursery school for almost 40 years in Washington, D.C., while also writing books, while also being a clothing designer and a photographer and a painter and a single parent and on the board of this and a room parent for that. And she just modeled this life of like, say yes to everything and you'll always have the energy. She has had more energy and more time to be a friend and a parent and a mentor and she just is like this major giver. So I think my life overall is very modeled after hers, very reminiscent of hers, which she hates when I say that because she's like, I see how tired you are. I see you doing everything. You don't take care of yourself. You need a break. And I'm like, listen, this is how I grew up with a parent who was doing everything and still had time to bake the cupcakes or wrap the presents or make the Halloween costumes or whatever. So I think just in general, my life is very reminiscent of my mother's, being that my husband lives in Italy full time, but does the back and forth 1 month here, 2 months there, 6 weeks here, 1 month there kind of a thing. I'm a single parent a lot of the time, and I still kind of manage to have these two careers and try to be a friend and a neighbor and a decent mother to my daughter and all of these things. So yeah, I think overall, she always made time for her art. She always made time for her kids, and she had this fulfilling career. So I think that's who I try to be like. She was way better at it than me though. She didn't have Instagram and like YouTube and streaming movies to distract her though.
Well, you mentioned music that was in the family. It was your father was also a musician,
Mm-hmm.
and your husband is now, and he's a musician too. So I'm wondering how much of those vibes you pick up. Are you a musician too? Do you sing? Do you play an instrument?
Yeah, I grew up playing instruments, clarinet, saxophone. I always sang. I come from a musical theater background. I am well known as somebody who loves karaoke. I wish that I were more formal with my musical life, meaning I always wished I had been in a band or kind of continued a music practice because I love music. I played the piano and the violin and all sorts of instruments growing up as well. But I feel like I'm quite musically minded, and I enjoy music so much. When I was younger, I spent a lot more time thinking about music, and I think this happens to a lot of people as they grow older. That isn't their social scene anymore. Going to shows and things. But I appreciate music. I'm constantly listening to music. I listen to French radio all near constantly.
Yeah, and Italian.
I do.
And Spanish.
Yes, but at this point, I can't speak Spanish anymore. I can understand Spanish. If I were in Spain or in Latin America, I would be able to pick it back up again. I used to live in Ecuador, and I learned Spanish speaking in Southern when I went to school in Southern California. But once I learned Italian about 10 years ago, I kind of lost all of my Spanish. It just comes out as Italian because I'm so much more used to speaking that on a daily basis. But I learned French growing up in school. And then we speak a lot of French and Italian, obviously, at home. So I try to make sure everybody is well-rounded in their languages. So that's a struggle.
What were you doing in Ecuador?
I studied abroad there. So I was studying Spanish, and I was making a film, but mostly I got appendicitis when I was there. So mostly I was in the hospital and recovering.
Oh, no fun. But did you learn some Spanish, though?
Yes, I learned Spanish. I was in school down there, and I was living with a family. We only spoke Spanish for 6 or 7 months, however long I was down there, and which I loved. I loved that. I loved learning Spanish. It was such a different way than when I had learned French, which was so academic. This was much more through travel and living there and studying in Spanish, like in school, everything was in Spanish. So I think that then set the stage to learn Italian very easily because it was much more of like a social learning, a cultural learning, and less of like a drills. Although the French drills have served me well, 30 years later.
I'm wondering if your daughter, who's now 9, is she picking up any of these talents that her mum has?
She is incredibly creative. She loves to draw. She loves to make sculptures, make anything. She's obsessed with miniatures, so she's always making miniature versions of things, which is something that I was always doing as a kid. She is an incredible storyteller. She was diagnosed a year ago with dyslexia, and I think there was kind of a moment where I felt like, oh no, she's going to be at this disadvantage because reading and writing is so challenging for her. But her words, her vocabulary, her way of telling stories and speaking is like beyond beautiful. We went on a camping trip that her school, the parents at the school organize. It's like three days camping just with all the families in the school, kind of huge range. And you get to just see the kids kind of on their own running around in the woods. And it was particularly rainy one day, and all the kids just kept coming to our tent and being like, Alma, can you tell us a story? And everyone would sit around and just listen to her kind of weave these tales, or they'd be walking down these trails and she's just telling this continual story with all her friends as characters. So I'm so impressed by her creativity and her imagination. She listens to stories constantly, and is just has this inner imagination that is really wonderful. So I don't know what she's going to do, but I can't imagine that she's not going to be some type of artist. She wants to be a fashion designer, but she's also really interested in making movies in this funny way. She got to be in a movie that I shot this last spring for Alice Diop, and which premiered at Venice this year. And she got to come with me and do the red carpet and watch the film, but her scene got cut to being like 30 seconds. And she was like, what? I waited all day. It was so long and it was that short. I was like, that's how it goes sometimes. So she wanted to be in the movie I just finished shooting, but she's like, is it going to be a lot of waiting? I said, yes. She's like, I'll wait for the next one. But, well, I hate to break it to you, but they're all kind of like that. So I don't know what she's going to do. She started dancing this last year and doing ballet, which I had done. And she's very expressive. So we'll see what she picks up. She certainly has a lot of advantages, being a multiple passport holder and hopefully with many languages under her belt at some point. Though obviously with her learning differences, it's going to be a different process for her kind of to learn to read and write in French if she does. But she picks up a lot.
Do you speak French with her at home?
We do, but it's all very, she kind of refuses to speak French back. And
So it kind of doesn't work then.
Yeah, unless we're in France with my in-laws and with the family, because they don't really speak English, so she has to speak French to them. And when she was much younger, it was all she was exposed to, because that's just, we all spoke French more often. And I think once she started elementary school, it's been much harder to kind of keep that up. But the same thing happened with my stepson. I actually never spoke English to him. He started taking English classes in school, like late elementary school and into middle school. And I just remember one day he was here in New York for the summer, which usually comes in the summer. And I couldn't find him in a store one day. And I turned around and he was speaking to this older woman in line completely in English. I was like, when did you learn English? Like, oh, I don't know. She just asked me a question, so I started answering her. And it's like from that day forward, he's just had perfect English. So I think that like just being exposed, the exposure is like, 3/4 of the battle, and she'll speak it when she's ready.
Well, you're clearly juggling many balls, Mia. I'm wondering what's next for you. You talk about going into hibernation, which is,
Yeah.
that is the rhythm of this life, isn't it? But what next?
What is next? I mean, I yesterday literally started prepping another feature, but that won't shoot until probably May or June of next year. But I like a long prep process, especially when I'm friends with the director. It's kind of, and this is actually two directors, so it'll be nice to kind of find our rhythm really far in advance, and they're both in LA and New York, so we'd like to get together when we can. But I'm not exactly sure. I feel like I've been turning down a lot of projects that I feel like either I've already kind of done something like that, or it doesn't pose a new challenge to me. I think in my mind, I know what I'd really love to do. I'd love to do like a big period piece or costume drama, just for something very different than kind of the contemporary indie world. But I'm not sure. I think I'm just staying open. I think with the spotlight on Sorry Baby and now Cover Up, the documentary, I think that some new doors will open. So I'm just kind of trying to stay open to what opportunities come next. And the right thing will come about. I think I usually have more clarity. And since I don't have strong clarity of, I definitely want to do this, or I need to do a TV show, or I have to do a studio movie, I think then it's just about patience while the clarity comes, or while the right opportunity unfolds itself.
Well, I'm sure something will come along. There's a great deal of energy I hear in your voice and excitement for the industry. So we look forward to what is coming next, Mia.
Yes, thank you.
But for now, thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I think it's lovely to not just talk about, the gear or the lenses or the how I did something, but the why behind what motivates me to keep doing things. And it's, always a good reminder that art and creativity comes from one's background, from what one is interested in, and how we kind of see the world and experience the world. So thanks for the opportunity to chat about all of that.
Of course. Well, we're going to hop over to YouTube very quickly now for just some bonus content. I've got a few more things I want to run by you, Mia, but for the podcast, thank you again so much.
Of course. Thank you.
And before you leave your podcast app, don't forget to scroll down to the show notes where you'll find the full transcript of this episode, as long as Mia's links to her social media and IMDb account, and also to our social media. You can reach us and join in the conversation on our Instagram account. That's The Art Podcast with 2 A's. And also reach us via email to theartpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to hop over to our YouTube channel, where we continue our conversation and have a bit of fun too, with some extended bonus content there. That's on the Art Podcast on YouTube. And if you know of anybody who might enjoy this episode, don't forget to share it with them. And if you have a moment, of course, we love it if you would leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app, because that improves our rankings and therefore helps others find the show amongst hundreds and hundreds of podcasts. My thanks again to my guest this week, Mia Cioffi Henry, and to you for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another guest from around the world of visual arts. So I do hope you'll join me then.